In the summer of 1955, Walt Disney had a problem. He was a few weeks off opening his most audacious venture yet, and he had a decision to make.
Should he install flushing toilets or drinking fountains?
His plumbers had gone on strike, and there wasn't enough time to do both. This was the last thing he needed. He was heavily in debt and had decided to stake not just his reputation, but his personal fortune on building an amusement park, something which was normally free to enter. But as Disneyland celebrates its 70th birthday, this is the story of how Walt Disney combined silver screen magic with the miracle of construction to build the happiest place on Earth. At the end of World War II, Walt Disney was in a bind. His movie studio had made it through the war making propaganda films, but he was now heavily in debt, and it was beginning to seem like the glory days of Disney were in the past. But the man behind the world's most famous mouse wasn't done yet. A chance visit to a railroad fair in Chicago in 1948 sparked an interest in fairground rides. Amusement parks and fairs were nothing new at the time, but for Disney, they lacked a certain magic. Usually, they were designed around the rides, with some attention given to scene setting and decoration, but nothing resembling any kind of creative vision.
Disney wanted
to get his idea off the ground. Disney called in art director Herb Ryman, and over the course of a frantic weekend in September 1953, they developed the initial concept for Disneyland. What they created was something radically different to anything that had come before. The first major difference came in the layouts. When researching other parks, Disney found that one of their weaknesses was they often lacked a coherent plan, making them pretty confusing to navigate. If he were to create the happiest place on Earth, it would have to be simple to get around. And to do that, Disney had to meticulously design the flow of people as well as the attractions. And that all began at the entrance. At the time, amusement parks in the US were typically free to enter and as such had multiple entrances. Disneyland, however, would have just one. By restricting access to the park in this way, Disney was able to create a tightly curated experience from the moment guests stepped foot in his park. Visitors would be greeted by an embankment on which sat a station for a miniature railway that ran the perimeter of the entire park. This would also conceal the park's first illusion, the embankment doubling as a physical barrier to prevent the sights and sounds of the outside world from getting in. From there, they would enter the park via a tunnel, which Disney called the stage curtains, a small plaque marking the point at which guests left the real world behind and entered Disney's imagination. First stop after entering was Main Street, USA, an idealized version of the American High Street, heavily based on Disney's hometown of Marceline in Missouri. From there, the park would make use of eye-catching visual elements, which Disney would coin as weenies, to pull people around the park. The grandest of these would of course be a fantasy castle, which would draw visitors towards a central plaza, the hub from which every land, ride and attraction would radiate out. As well as making navigation easier, it would create a point at which people could meet and rest. Branching off from this were a series of themed areas. Other parks had often included novelty buildings to give a sense of the exotic, but these would be standalone features rather than part of a coherent theme. What Disney planned was total immersion. Just like the park itself, each land would be visually cut off from anything that might spoil the illusion. With the concept sketches complete, Disney sent his brother Roy off to New York to raise money for the build. It was full of them. He turned to set designers and artists in his own company, but also from a powerful rival. 20th Century Fox had a backlot 4 times the size of Disneyland, and it was filled with scenic artists used to building everything from city streets to steamboats. It was from here that Disney filled the ranks of his new army of Imagineers. The design process started with a pitch, which was then worked up into storyboards and further on into models of increasing sizes. The whole process was fluid, with constant revisions and alterations made throughout, including on some of the park's biggest structures. This is Neuschwanstein Castle in southern Germany. It was used as the inspiration for the iconic Sleeping Beauty castle, which lays at the head of the park. It has a gatehouse, turrets and palace, all of which provided a reference for Disney's version. On the front of the palace, it has a balcony which leads from the spectacular Singers' Hall. This detail was initially included in the plans, but in a sign of how fluid the development was, it was changed purely by chance. During the design phase, engineers had taken the model apart for cleaning, only to quickly reassemble it when Walt Disney came to visit. In the rush, they put the palace back on the wrong way round. Disney noticed the mistake, but actually preferred the way it looked, and had the castle built as the model stood. The balcony still lives on today, but at the back of the castle. This level of improvisation didn't stop at the design stage. The Jungle Cruise has become one of the most popular rides of Disneyland, and has since been replicated at other Disney parks. Designing a ride like this today requires months of planning and design work by huge teams of people. But back in 1954, the ride's layout was solely down to this man, legendary art director Harper Goff. With a bulldozer driver looking on, Goff took a stick and walked around the ride's plot, drawing a line in the soil. Once completed, he drew a parallel line a few meters away. The bulldozer followed, piling up the Joe Fowler had predicted. Many of the rides weren't finished, and most of those that were ended up breaking down. A gas leak near the castle nearly burned it to the ground, and the Mark Twain almost sank with the amount of people boarding it.
Hello, Irene.
How are you? It's listening.
As for the striking plumbers, Walt had opted to finish the toilets on time rather than the drinking fountains, leading people to accuse him of a cynical ploy to buy drinks instead of providing free water. But ultimately, none of that mattered. Just as his first cartoons had done nearly 30 years earlier, Disneyland had captured the public imagination. Work on the park went on, and over the following years, rides were continuously improved. Despite the princely entrance fee of $1 for adults and 50 cents for children, within 2 months of opening, 1 million people had visited the park. Disneyland had become so iconic that on a trip to America in 1959, the president of the USSR expressed his and his wife's disappointment that they were barred from visiting. For his part, Disney was never completely satisfied with Disneyland, and with the lessons he'd learned, he quickly turned his attention to building a bigger, better version in Florida. Walt Disney passed away before he could ever see the completion of his next creation. But Walt Disney World would prove to be one of the biggest and most sophisticated theme parks ever built. This video, and you want to get more from the definitive video channel for construction,